Hey everyone, Cerebral Tackle back with you again today. I'm going to tell a story that I alluded to in my last video with Chris. He was my partner during this event when things went to hell. Well, let's jump right in. It's been about 15 or so years ago, and our club was fishing, I want to say, a February or March tournament. Early in the year, water was still really cold, like not to 60 yet. And well, during that time of year, if you're not going to be fishing a power plant lake, you want to fish a lake where the fish, the bass in this instance, pattern up shallower. This lake was known for shallow bass year round. As a matter of fact, you could pretty much stick to 3 to 8 foot deep all year round in this particular lake. Now, the forecast for this particular day called for a lot of wind. I want to say it was supposed to be sustained around 35 to 40 with gusts to like 40, 45. That's if my memory's serving me correct. I know one thing for sure. That's the forecast was wrong. You know, early on in the year when you have the afternoon heating, it causes the wind to build up and build up more. Well, when my wife and I stepped out onto the patio of the lake house we were renting for this event, it was dark 30 and the wind was already whistling in our ears loudly. I'll never forget getting loaded up to go to the ramp and already having this eerie, just deep sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I didn't like what the weather was doing, and I just had a feeling it was going to get worse. So we get to the ramp, right? I'm president. I talked to my tournament director, who is newly elected to the position. I pulled him aside and said, "Do you hear that whistling? I don't like where this is going, buddy. Are you sure you want to do this?" Technically, it was his call, and I didn't want to step on any toes. So I wanted to give him the opportunity to make the right call. He takes the moment to go talk to the previous year's tournament director. That guy was former Coast Guard. And of course, he says, "Oh, it's fine to me. I'd do it." Well, yeah, but we're also not in a Coast Guard frigate either. So the tournament director comes back, tells me, we're going for it. I didn't like it, but technically it's his call. So we all launch our boats and head to our first spot. And I'll tell you one thing, between point A and point B, it beat the crap out of us. I hadn't seen waves that big. Finally, we find a little cove arm that runs perpendicular to the lake. And that's important because the wind was blowing right down the gullet of this bad boy. So being the fact this narrow cove allowed for a little bit of break in the wind, it allowed us to kind of regain our breath and stop and think about what to do next. Meanwhile, back at the lake house, my wife's looking out the big bay windows. She sees one of our boats hit a wave, go straight up in the air and almost backwards. Luckily, they caught just enough forward momentum. They were able to regain and come to a very hard landing on the water. She calls me. She just said, "I saw so-and-so and so-and-so almost flip over backwards. Are y'all sure you want to do this?" I'm like, "Well, we're out here now. We're going to have to take a wait-and-see approach." In a very eerily fashion, the wind dies for a couple of minutes. My partner and I kind of look at each other. We know there's still a front in play, and we know there's still afternoon heating to come, but it was weird. I mean, it didn't lay flat, but it reduced by quite a bit. So we continue fishing for a little while. Then, a few minutes later, the wind picks up worse. I checked the forecast again. They've changed it. We're now talking sustained winds of 45 to 50 miles an hour with gusts 60 to 65. It went from horrible to a full-blown emergency. It's at this point that I phoned my newly elected tournament director to have a conversation with him. Guess what? Those two guys my wife saw catch air and almost flip backwards, he was one of them. I told him, "Listen, I'm not out to step on any toes, but this is crap. We've got to call this. We got to do what we got to do." Even though it technically was not my call, I did not want to be in charge of this thing should someone get injured or lose their lives. I was pissed we were even out there at this point. The tournament director, having caught air and realized the error of his ways, was in complete agreement. This thing was over. So We agreed to have my wife pick up the club roster and start calling everyone that was on the roster. Our plan was to have everyone get to the closest ramp they could, beach it if they had to, tie her up, get to safety. We would come pick them up, get their keys, their trailers to them, and help get everybody out of the water as soon as possible. Now, having a plan on how to get everyone to safety, Chris and I batten down the hatches and start making it down this creek arm to open water to the main lake. He looks at me. He says, "Remember, man, I fished on the biggest stage of them all on the Great Lakes before with FLW. I fished Lake Erie. This ain't got crap on me." He helped me feel confident. So we strapped in, we're ready to go. However, when we made that first turn out to open water and hit that first wave and went airborne, he looks at me and says, "F me, I take it back. This is Lake Erie." At this point, we had 4 to 6 foot rollers blowing down the gullet of this lake. At one point, the boat went in the air. I drifted out of my seat with the boat being underneath me. I was going to go out into the water until he cut the boat hard back to the left and caught me like a catcher catching a fly ball. It was at this point I just huddled down in the floor and held on for dear life. I had a little emergency pouch in my auto inflatable vest. In there I had 2 vacuum sealed aerial flares. There's only 2 times in my tournament career I had those pulled out in my hand. This was the first one. He was doing his best to stay on top of these waves, and most of them he stayed on top, even though we couldn't help but to spear a few coming back. I'm convinced had I been with anybody else that day, we wouldn't be talking. Well, we get back to the ramp, and things get even crazier. The first hard thing was just getting him out on the courtesy dock to go get the truck in the water. That courtesy dock was a floating dock, and it was rocking violently. I mean, up and down. It was like he was on some platform in American Gladiator. Finally, we did all we can do, which is toss the keys to one of our other members on the bank and let him put the boat in the water. We weren't even going to be able to get Chris out. Now, that other member ended up being the tournament director. He gets us pulled out. We get up in our spot. The first thing he does is run up to me and says, "I am so sorry." I could tell by the look on his face, he was scared crapless. He regretted his decision. I said, "Man, whatever, we'll talk about that later. Let's get everyone to safety." Unfortunately, we started fielding calls. We were already too late on 2 accounts. One boat was heading back to the ramp because they had electrical issues. Remember that little time period where I told you the wind laid down for a couple of minutes? They were passing the cove where the ramp was at that point. And they said, "You know what? Maybe the wind's dying down. We can go ahead and go fishing." The wind kicked up again. They took a wave over the back. Their electronics shorted out. At this point, their boat is dead in the water. It gets pushed towards a sandbar. Because as you know, with wind and waves, it'll catch the largest surface area, which is the side of the boat. So they get caught in a trough. They end up hitting a sandbar hard, flips the boat. They get out. They're fortunately able to walk to the rocky bank and eventually climb up the side to get out of the lake. They look back at their boat. There was an old marina that had a bunch of tall, exposed steel dock pilings where the marina used to be. They watched that boat get pushed through those pilings like cheese through a cheese grater. They watched their boat get shredded before their very eyes. Little did we know, earlier on, we had another boat that launched late. These 2 young men that were new to the club got there late. As they were launching, they saw another boat that was overloaded with people desperately trying to make it back to the ramp. That boat capsized. Everyone's hanging on to the outside of the boat for dear life. These 2 young men do everything they can to try to get them to safety. They rush out to them, try to get their boat hooked up with everyone else crawling on top of the other boat, and they try pulling them back in. Unfortunately, the weight of the boat drags their motor and skeg down into a sandbar, gets them hung. Now their boat takes on water and they're out. And everyone is trying desperately to get to the shore. Fortunately, there was a park nearby. The park staff sees everybody, goes out there, does everything they can to pull them out of the water and rescue them. The park staff gives them hot showers, lets them use their facilities to dry their clothes. The park staff was amazing. So fortunately, on this day, we didn't lose any lives. We did lose 2 boats. You know what else we did? Promise not to come back to this damn lake for a long, long time. Now this cold water, not even being into the 60s yet, could have given anybody hypothermia and fast. We were really lucky we didn't lose life. You know, if you don't like the conditions a tournament's going to go out of, don't go. There's nothing that says that you absolutely have to go. Talk with the tournament directors. Try to reason with them. But I suggest, if it's in your gut instinct not to go, don't. I mean, there's nothing in any rules of these tournaments that says they're going to hold a gun to your head if you don't go out. So don't. Don't take the macho way out. Don't do it just because, well, if I don't, someone else is going to get the points and the win. No, it's not worth it. Don't do it. You know, looking back, I probably would have just stayed my butt on the bank anyway out of protest. But fortunately, I had Chris as a driver. And like I said in that last video, one of the best freaking boat drivers I've ever seen. 4 to 6 foot rollers. When we're just lining up to put the boat on the trailer to come out there at the ramp, we took 3 over the side. Let me tell you, it was freaking horrible. But fortunately, everybody made it back. But a bunch of guys had to be non-boaters for a while. In all this, there was one guy we couldn't get a hold of immediately. Why? He didn't have his phone on him. Guess who had his phone? His wife, because he left it at home. She wanted to know why the president was calling during tournament hours. I had to tell her. Guess who was in trouble when he got back to the bank? When I told him that his wife knew that he wasn't coming in when he was supposed to because of the bad weather, because I couldn't get a hold of him, he said, "Why'd you call my wife for?" I wasn't. I was calling you. Why the hell did you leave your phone at home? I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you look down through a list of tournament rules, you can put a name beside every single freaking rule. This happened because of this person. This happened because of this person. We're having to make new rules. Well, guess what? The next year we had a new rule. Always have a freaking communication device in your freaking boat. Well, we called that this guy's rule. His wife made sure that I have him give her a call with my phone whenever he got back, and he did. He still wasn't happy with me, but hey, I didn't leave his phone at home. He and his son were so road hard and put up wet that they had to lay their clothes out across the hood of their truck to dry. And they laid there and took a nap for a while. They were beaten down. But the tournament was over. Everyone was alive, even though property was lost. And we weren't going back to this crap hole anytime soon. You know, it is what it is. Some lakes just don't deserve the visit. So the moral to the story is, always check the weather, always wear your life jacket, always go with your gut instinct. Don't be stupid, don't be a hero. If folks make fun of you for not wanting to go out, screw them. As a matter of fact, I have a funny story coming up here in the near future where a similar incident happened. I used it to my advantage, ended up winning a tournament. Everybody else that was poking and laughing at me, well, they got what was coming to them. So, until next time, my friends, please like, share, subscribe, watch the weather, and go out there and keep it wet.